What do you do when the map stops working? What do you do when the strategy that got you here won't get you there? What do you do when the world changes faster than your plans? Most people panic. Most organizations retreat. Most leaders try to protect what they already know. But pioneers do something different. They move. Not because they have all the answers, not because they have perfect clarity, but because they trust the one calling them forward. See, here's the deal, peeps. The future has always belonged to people willing to step into territory they do not fully understand. And that's exactly where leadership is today. The world is changing. Technology is changing. Communities are changing. Families are changing. And the old maps aren't working like they used to. The question is not whether change is coming. The question is whether you are willing to move with it. Well, what's up, family? I want to welcome you to the living room, where real conversations about leadership, purpose, faith, family, and of course, mentorship inspire everyday people to become extraordinary leaders. I'm your host, Lewis Jackson, and I am so excited that you are here today because we are going to talk about something a little scary. Not really. What we're going to talk about today is what it means to lead beyond borders. What does that mean? To get beyond myself and lead beyond borders. And we're going to really deep dive into that because, as you know, we have been on a whole series this season talking about the leader shift and beginning to talk about that in order to lead in 21st century, we are going to have to change how we do leadership. And I am proposing this season that there is a particular way. And again, some of you have agreed, some of you do not agree. It's okay. We're in the living room. It just so happened that I got the mic. And what I'm proposing to you is not the right way, but it is another way for us to think through leadership in the 21st century. And if you don't mind, as you've been listening to me, and if you have not, if this is your first time coming into the living room with us, I'm telling you, you need to go ahead and catch up. All you got to do is go to our Apple. If you listen to it on Apple, Spotify, you can even go to our YouTube channel. All you got to do is go to YouTube and type in the @ symbol, Lead with Lewis, and you can go in and look at all the episodes up until this point so you can get caught up on our conversation. But we are excited, y'all. I'm excited about what God is doing, and I am excited about helping everyday leaders begin to be change makers in your community, be change makers in your church, business, and in your families. I'm excited. I love what I do. And so if you have not liked, subscribed, rated this podcast, shared it with somebody, pause it. That's the good thing about podcasts. You can pause it and I ain't going nowhere. Go ahead and pause it and go share it with somebody. And then come on back and let's get down to the nitty gritty. Let's go into this conversation because today's conversation is living and leading beyond borders. We really want to get deep into, we got to get beyond our borders. And how do we do that? Well, here's one way as we start our conversation. The best leaders don't wait for clarity. Uh-oh. Here we go. I hope you buckle up. See, one of the biggest myths in leadership is this: I don't move when I got all the answers. Who has said that? You couldn't have said that if you are a leader. Because here's the reason why you couldn't say that. Because leadership rarely works that way. See, there are a few people, even in the Bible. One comes to mind is Abraham. Think about Abraham. Abraham didn't have all the answers. All he had was a calling. And the reality is that most leaders, they really want certainty. I'm one of them. If you know me, you know I like concrete, evidence-based things. But it seems like God always keep putting me in spaces where I don't get that certainty that I want. I'm learning because most leaders are pioneers. And if you are a pioneer in some shape, form, or fashion, you have to operate through trust, not certainty. Because if you be honest, many people, they are waiting for the better plan. I need more resources. I need this elusive, perfect timing. I need complete confidence. Man, if you doing that, sad day for you. You ain't going nowhere. You're going to be chilling right where you are. But growth, if you really want to grow as a leader, it never begins there. Hear me. Growth does not begin with a better plan, more resources, perfect timing, complete confidence. It doesn't begin there. Growth begins when you take a step before you see the entire staircase. That's where growth begins. You take that first step. And when you take that first step, you're going to find out that the staircase, it really has always been there, but it won't be revealed until you take that first step. The most impactful leaders in history weren't people who knew everything. They were people willing to move before everything made sense. So if you're going to be a leader in the 21st century, you must shift from certainty to trust. You got to trust the one that called you. We are living in a very different world, as I've been talking about these last few conversations. Our world is different, man. And if you are looking for certainty, there's not a lot of it. It's not. But here's the deal. I got to have trust. And that it seems like that is the thing that we don't have in God or each other. It is the thing that is being attacked the most. Because if I can't trust you, then I won't move. But we got to begin to learn to trust. But as you begin to trust, we must think about this. Every leader has a border, okay? Every leader does. We just finished talking about that the best leaders don't wait for perfect clarity. But now I want you to start thinking every leader has a border. And when we think about borders, we often think about, like, are you saying geography, Lois? Not necessarily. The most significant borders that we have are usually internal. See, sometimes the border that we have is fear. Sometimes it's comfort. Sometimes this border that locks us in is disappointment, tradition, the need to control the outcomes. But here is the truth. The greatest limitations in most leaders is not your environment. Oh my gosh, hear me. And I'm saying this for my own self because I'm living what I'm talking to y'all about. The greatest limitation isn't your environment. It is the story you've accepted about what is possible. Are you with me? It is the story that you have. So I see this all the time with young people who have grew up in a particular area or a particular culture or a particular side of town, and they think they got these big aspirations, right? But honestly, they don't know that these big aspirations are honestly capped because their version of this aspiration is limited to what they see. And they think what they see is what is. Oh man. I live in a town in Anderson, Indiana, where this whole movement was birthed out of. And I have to be honest with you. You can walk in that town and maybe any other town in America, but I know in Anderson, you can walk in and people who have been living there for most of their lives, they have a cap on the growth that they believe they can get in that city. They believe like we can't go beyond where we are. Boy, I remember the good old days. You remember them? I remember when we could, but now it's a ghost town. There's no opportunity, though. But what is crazy, within, I would say, like the last decade, Anderson has been having a resurgence. But here's the deal, the resurgence started coming from people from without, seeing Anderson as a place for growth and prosperity. So now, hold on. These people who comes into the city that is looking at your same city, going through the same struggle, but see something totally different. What is the difference? It is the story that they are telling themselves about what is possible. There's a lot more that we could say about that. And over time, we will deep dive into what is shaping our story. But what I want you to see as a leader, you have to understand that every season of growth is going to require you to cross a border that you have allowed in your life. Every season is a season of growth. The good, the bad, and the ugly is helping you to know you're going to have to, if you're going to get through it, you're going to have to cross this border. In a border between who you were, and there's going to be a border between who you want to become. A border between what you've always done and a border between what you're being called to do. A border between safety and then a border between significance. You're going to cross these borders. And if you want to continue to be this next level leader, this leadership is going to take that you're going to have to say, you know what? What borders have I been standing at for too long? Where do I need to shift my mind from limitation to possibility? Where are you at? Yes, everything is not perfect. It ain't perfect for nobody. But if you're going to be a leader in the 21st century, affecting your community, your family, your business, you're going to have to be a person who's ready to move beyond that border. Well, what does it take, Lewis, to move beyond these borders? Simple. You got to become a pioneer. You got to become a pioneer. You got to develop a spirit of a pioneer. I want you to think about it. Every movement, every big thing in anyone's life begins with somebody willing to go first. Let that sink in. Somebody got to go first. If you've been in a family that has never graduated high school, somebody got to go first. If you've been in a family that's never owned a house, somebody got to go first. If you've been in a family that you've worked only in factories or on dead-end jobs, but you see that we can have generational wealth and we can have jobs of significance and entrepreneurship, somebody has to go first. Every movement needs builders. Every movement needs visionaries. Every movement needs pioneers. Yeah. See, here's the deal. Last week, I referenced a book that we're going to keep referencing through this whole series, The Starfish and the Spider. And in that book, it teaches you that movements often emerge when people stop waiting for permission and begin responding to opportunity. Oh my gosh. Hear me, peeps. I'm getting excited. I got to calm down. Can I tell you something? You cannot keep waiting on everybody to say, yay, we're with you. Some people can't see what you see. That's why you got to become a pioneer. Pioneers are not necessarily the smartest people, and they usually are not the most experienced people. They're simply willing to move before everyone else sees what they see. That's simply what it is. Think about it. The first mentor, the first church planner, the first entrepreneur, the first community organizer, the first parent who decides a generational cycle will stop with them. It is going to begin when someone is willing to leave the familiar. At the recording of this particular podcast, I was listening to a video of a speech that President Barack Obama and Michelle, they were opening up the Obama Presidential Center in South Central Chicago. And he began to tell a little bit of his story of how he moved from New York, and he had got, and I think it was like in 1984, 1985, and he was hired by a group of churches on the south side of Chicago to come and help mobilize them to do some community work. He had never been to Chicago. He had never been around there. He said how he had a beat up car, and he had the idealism of the civil rights movement. He didn't know that he was going to change the world. He just felt like I'm supposed to. And what ended up happening, he ends up becoming the first African American president to be able to mobilize and not only win office once, but wins it twice. Here's the deal. It took a pioneer to be able to say, I can do this. I'm going to do this. Why did it take that? He had to have a heart, a mind to know. He never seen it around him. He just knew there was something, there was a call, there was something pushing him. Can I holler at you? There was something pushing you. I believe in these days, the Holy Spirit, and those of you, I'm going to get a little churchy on you, so just be okay. Bear with me. But here's the deal. I believe the Holy Spirit is moving deeply, and he is beginning to reawaken some things in people. But some of the things that he is reawakening in us are things that we've never saw with our own eyes, but we've seen it in our spirit. When I began to start moving with the village, and I felt like I am a galvanizer. I am someone that is supposed to shake up the church, to let them know that you're more than just a religious institution. You're more than a Bible study in a small group. You are the change that this whole world is needing. And I never saw it, but I felt like I can galvanize the church to mentor their community. Did I see that? No, but it was something on the inside that let me know I can go do it. Here's the deal. Some of you that's listening to me right now, you a product of what God showed me years ago. So if you're going to be a leader in this 21st century, you're going to have to say, okay, I'm going to shift my mindset. But here's another thing. If you're going to continue to become a leader that will go beyond your borders, this one is good. One of the most powerful leadership lessons that I've learned comes from the life of Abraham. and he lived in tents in the country that God said is going to be yours and your descendants. The Bible talks about that he believed God so much that he decided that I will live in a tent, believing that one day I'll be able to build a house. See, I want you to think about, if you're going to become a person that will live beyond borders, you're going to have to learn to live in the tent. Ooh, I feel like preaching. Let me slow my roll. See, tents are temporary. Tents are flexible. Tents can move. And many leaders struggle because they tried to make temporary structures permanent. You do have the vision, and God has given you the promise. But you have to understand there's process. You may say, Luz, what are some of the tents that we deal with as leaders? It could be a program that only worked for a season, but you keep trying to hang on to it. It could be a strategy that God gave you, but it was only for a season. It could even be a structure that only works for a season. But a true leadership is going to require adaptability. 21st century leadership, you're going to have to adapt. One of the biggest lessons that we read out of the Starfish and the Spider book, again, you need to go get it, is that decentralized movements, they survive because they adapt. If you're going to survive, you're going to have to adapt. Rigid systems will break, but flexible systems will grow. And if you're going to be a leader in the 21st century, the strongest leader must learn the difference between what must remain and what must evolve. There are some things that must remain in order for you to be who God made you to be. But then there are other things that you got to understand, they must evolve. In the 21st century in the Christian church, there are some things that we must keep. Jesus is central. He is everything. God through Jesus Christ. He's the key to everything. But here's the deal. There's other things that will evolve. How we do worship, where we do worship, it's going to evolve. You can't be scared about that. There's businesses right now that if you are delivering a product and you did great in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, but now with the birth of AI technology, you can't always do the same thing. It doesn't mean that I got to change the product. I may have to deliver it different. You have to be able to move and shift your leadership from being rigid to being adaptable. But let me drill down on something, because some of you that hear me will be like, here goes this young whippersnapper. Everybody always wants change. Everybody always needs to, you know what I'm saying? They be thinking like we just want to tear up stuff. And I'm not saying that, because here's the deal. Adaptability does not mean that you abandon your values. No. This is where many leaders get confused. And I don't want you to get confused. And I want to make sure I'm very clear in my communication. When change happens, some people want to change everything. I was one that became very cynical of traditional church, right? Because I felt like it was centralized, it was hierarchical, and I wanted to just tear up the whole church. Man, that was foolish. Because, hello, it birthed me, fool. What's wrong with you? But when things start happening, you go and try to change everything. That was me. But then there are others on the other side of the spectrum. They don't want to change anything. The world around you has shifted, and you still doing the same stuff. And you wondering why you're ineffective. You're ineffective because you have not learned how to adapt. Wise leaders know the difference. What is the difference? Your mission must remain. Your vision, your values must remain. Your integrity must remain. Your purpose must remain. But here's the deal. But your methods may need to change. If you're going to be a leader in the 21st century, whether that is in family, and this applies to family, I want you to know I'm giving you these principles, but they apply overall as a leader. Your methods may need to change. The way my father raised my sister and I, it's not the same way fully that I have raised my two boys. But here's the deal. What I'm seeing, my oldest son has gotten married and he has a son. His method is changing with how he is with my grandson. It doesn't mean that him changing methods has changed our values. It just means that times have changed and he can't keep doing it the same way. Does that make sense? Every generation speaks a different language. In the future, hear me, leaders, belongs to leaders who can hold tightly to your principles while holding loosely to your processes. I got to say it again. I want to make sure I say that real good. Hear that. The future belongs to leaders who can hold tightly to principles while holding loosely to processes. Let that sink in. Every season requires different tools, and every challenge is going to require a different approach. The mission stays, the method evolves. Hear that. If you are a leader listening to me, and especially if you are one of the leaders that are functioning in one of our hubs, or you may be a mentor that is functioning in one of the Village, Indiana huts, hear me. Yes, the students and families that we're working with, they may not necessarily think like we do. They may not necessarily do things the way we do. They may walk into your hub and they may come in and they look like they come from Mars to us. Here's the deal. The mission of Jesus Christ is the same. He is the one. And he tells us that we must love our neighbor, but the way we love them, the way we help them see the love of Christ may evolve. And it's okay. So let's finish this up. And I'm going home. The future is built by people who are willing to go first. Every leader eventually reaches a moment where they must decide. And this is where you are today listening to me. Will I stay where it's comfortable, or will I go where I'm called? The people we admire throughout history, and we've talked about some of them today, they answered that question. Abraham crossed borders. Moses confronted Pharaoh. Nehemiah rebuilt walls. The disciples carried the gospel into the world. Barack Obama became the first African-American president. None of them had complete clarity, but they did have conviction. And conviction carried them where certainty never could. And the future is not built by people who is going to wait for everything to be perfect and wait for guarantees. It is built by people willing to move forward despite uncertainty. We must move from comfort to calling. This is my question to you. This week, ask yourself, where am I waiting for certainty? And what border have I been afraid to cross? What temporary structure am I holding on to? What method needs to evolve? And what future is God inviting me to help create? Because leadership is not about standing still. Leadership is about moving forward when others are afraid to move. Hey, y'all, I hope today helped you. I hope you were able to get something out of what I'm talking about. I'm in the midst of living this. So if I got a little passionate, that's why. Because I understand we are the answer. God placed his Holy Spirit in earthen clay pots, and we keep looking for everything else. And he's saying, I'm looking for you. Will you go first? Will you move? Will you make the leadership and take us into the next generation? We're going to go deeper next week in the living room. I holla.